What if the most loving thing you can do after losing a pet isn't moving on? It's actually learning how to carry the love without the shame. Welcome to Straight Up Dog Talk, the podcast helping burned out pet parents who feel stuck with their pup finally let go of the guilt, learn to communicate, and build the bond you've always dreamed of through a partnership-based approach that combines training, nutrition, and enrichment instead of chasing the quick fixes that don't actually work. I'm Em, and in this episode, you'll learn why pet loss grief is real and valid, the difference between anticipatory, acute, ambiguous, disenfranchised, and complicated grief, and how to honor your pet with simple rituals, reflective writing, and creative memorials without a timeline or the pressure to move on. Because healing isn't forgetting, it's finding a new way to love. We're welcome Anne-Marie, who is an author. She sent me a wonderful book called Healing Wisdom for Pet Loss, An Animal's Lover's Guide to Grief. This is her book, so you definitely need to check this out. We're going to just jump right in here at the beginning. Tell us what inspired you to write Healing Wisdom for Pet Loss. Was it personal? Was it clinic? Was it something else entirely?
Mixture of everything. It wasn't one thing, except I would say maybe the one final thing that put me over the point where I said, I think I really need to write this book was the fact that I was hearing so many stories from clients about their loss of their pet and where it was not being validated. And that was just like, whoa. And then I kept thinking about more and more issues with this loss and the fact that it's, really a disenfranchised loss because it's not really validated in our society as well as it should be, in my opinion. Yes, there are definitely people out there that will understand it and you can talk to them about it and they get it. But I think the overwhelming majority are folks that just don't want to talk about it and they don't feel validated, so they don't want to talk about it because they don't want to feel like they're being listened to truly. So that was the big reason. Hearing those stories about the loss in their life of their beloved pet was just overwhelming. Like, I got to make this more recognized. And so I think the best way is to write a book and get it out there to as many people as possible.
You've supported a lot of people through the pain of losing a beloved animal. What do you wish more people understood about pet loss and the way it shows up in our lives?
How important this loss is. And it needs to be grieved fully and to be, it really needs to be understood. And with that, I think it would go along that if it's understood, there would be more compassionate help for it. And people would really get the fact that this is a pet that's been in your life maybe for many, many years, maybe a short amount of time, but regardless of the amount of time, they've had an impact on our lives, a huge impact. They're really a part of the fabric of our being. We get up with them, we start our day with them, we end our day with them, and all the times in between. And so it's a huge amount. I'm sure as a pet lover, they bring unconditional love, and it's really a pure love. It's pure and non-judgmental. I think that's just like awesome. I mean, wow. It's pure and they do not judge us, So it's like, wow, it's a perfect basis for a relationship.
Do you think that is why so many people don't understand pet loss? Like the people that don't have pets in their home, they don't understand the loss because they don't feel that pure, unbridled love the way that we do from our pets?
I think that's part of it. They never really had that relationship in their life, so it's hard for them to understand it. But it doesn't mean you can't learn about it and try to understand it, especially if you have a partner or a good friend that has one that they've lost. You can at least try to understand it by asking them some questions like, wow, I just didn't realize that this would have this much impact for you when you lost your pet. Can you help me understand it? Can you share something with me? Because I really want to understand it. Hopefully that would be something that maybe you would encounter. Somebody that really wants to understand but doesn't, and they're open to hearing about it. And then, of course, you may experience the opposite, which would be very sad and difficult, where someone just says, come on, just get over it. It was just a dog. It was just a cat. Come on, you can get another one. Well, you absolutely can get another one, but it will not be the same one.
I think that's where a lot of people get lost. We're just starting to really validate that dogs, cats, pets are unique individuals. They have their own thoughts and their own personalities. And I think that a lot of people, especially people who've never had that deep of a relationship with a pet, they just don't see that and they don't respect it. And so they don't understand that losing a pet is just like losing a family member in that aspect. It's like you said, part of your day, part of your routine, part of the ritual that you go through. And it is such a beautiful, unconditional relationship that it really, I think it cuts a lot deeper than even, I'm going to say it, losing a human sometimes, because with humans, there's always conditions. There's always stipulations. There's always anger and hurt feelings and maybe a little bit of tension, or we don't talk for a while. There's ups and downs in our relationships. We don't have that with our pets. And so I feel like people who have never really felt like they were connected to people that deeply, like me, who love animals very, very deeply, is because we have that really thick connection that our pets bring to us, and they fill us with so much joy without judgment, without shame, without fear, and all of those things.
Yeah, I agree. That's a lot of good points you brought up. Because like I said, I think that the biggest thing is there isn't that judgment there. They don't care if your hair is pink or white, or you're tall or you're short or you're thin or you're heavy, whatever. They just want to be with you, and they're not out there to judge you. That's the biggest thing. And their love for you is not going to keep changing unless, there's abuse there or anything like that, of course. But that's a whole other story. We won't get into that.
Your book highlights different types of grief, like anticipatory grief, disenfranchised grief. Can you walk us through what those are, what they mean, and why they matter?
Sure. No matter what you go through in life, if you be informed about whatever it is, it helps you get through it better. So it's better to be out there and not be in the dark about something. All these types of grief are common in any type of loss that you have. Even if it's a loss of a job, a loss of your health, it's not just about pet loss. So you can kind of use these for any type of grief you may be going through at the time. What's really interesting about anticipatory grief is that you've got some time to plan, whereas you wouldn't have it if it was a sudden loss. Like, for example, a car accident or something like that, a tragic accident. So anticipatory grief, I think it's something we need to really be grateful for and embrace it. Yes, we're going to have all the sadness knowing that the end result is going to be we're going to be losing our pet. But we can plan when we're kind of more in a stable frame of mind and not like overwhelmed by the immediate loss. So it's an opportunity to make plans for what you want to do after your pet dies, if you're going to have their remains cremated, or if you're going to bury them or scatter their ashes. So you can plan for that. You can plan for exactly how you want to honor them afterwards. And then you can also think about a lot of other ways as you move through the grief, because you may have an idea now what you want to do to honor their memory, but you're going to have a lot more ideas later. It's just an opportunity to plan for the time when they will actually pass on. And then there's the acute grief. That's the immediate grief that you have right after the loss. You're going to have maybe some symptoms in your body where you're restless, you can't sleep, you don't feel like eating. So you're going to have the bodily symptoms. You're going to have the physical symptoms. Maybe you're really angry because maybe you thought you should have done something differently and you didn't. So there could be some anger there. And like I said, the bodily symptoms, which can be, anything ranging from, lack of sleep, not eating, not able to function. If you come to that point where you're not able to get up in the morning and function, if this goes on continually for a long time, you get into complicated grief. And that can be where you really need to seek out some additional professional help to get you through this. And there should be no shame in that. It's a difficult loss. There's no timeline for grief, actually. There's no timeline for it. So it's not like you're going to say, I should be over this in 6 months. No, it doesn't work that way. It kind of ebbs and flows, too. So you can think you're doing pretty good now. A couple months have gone by, and all of a sudden something hits you. And it's like, wow, something came back like a trigger. Something that made you think of this passing of your pet, and it just overwhelms you. It's going to be a process where it ebbs and flows. It takes time. There's no timeline. But if it does become something that's overwhelming to you, where you're not able to function in your daily life, then it's a red flag to maybe seek out some professional help. So the other types of grief, we've talked about anticipatory, acute so far. There's ambiguous loss. That's a loss where there's a lot of uncertainty about the death. Maybe the gate was left open and your pet took off and they're nowhere to be found. And maybe you never find them. So there's always this uncertainty of what happened to my pet. And it could be something like that, or it could be a case where I went through with my dog Wishbone. He had cognitive dysfunction, which is a doggy dementia. So we lost him, like he was physically present in our life until the day he died. So he was physically present, but he was emotionally not as there for us. It's just like a person that has Alzheimer's or any kind of dementia. So they're there physically, they're present in your day-to-day life, but they're not really fulfilling the emotional part of what you need from them. So that's what it was with Wishbone. We decided that we were going to let him leave on his own terms after we discussed it with our vet. And as long as he wasn't in pain and he continued to eat and we could take him for walks, we felt that it was okay. We're going to just let him go on his own time. But if anything changed, then, maybe we would have changed our minds. So he died peacefully, and he actually just stopped eating and drinking, and the next day he passed. Right. So it was difficult because we just felt, let's just let him go on his own terms. And he still would give us love. He would sit in our laps and we would be able to pet him, and he seemed to respond to it. So as long as he was doing that and wasn't in pain and he was able to walk around and go for walks, we decided to try that route, and we're glad we did. So that's ambiguous loss, a couple features of that. And then we talked briefly about complicated loss a few minutes ago, and that's the one where you need to be aware that if it comes to the point where you're not functioning in your day-to-day activities, you need to seek out some professional help on that. So I think we've covered all the types of grief. Well, there's another one that's called discrepant grief. It's actually when there's one person or people that don't understand it, and you're going through all this immense grief. So it's kind of like a discrepancy over the grief because somebody else is thinking, well, why are you having such a difficult time? I'm still carrying on my life, and that's fine because we're all different. And that's the way you handle it, and this is the way I'm handling it. So there's that discrepancy in the grief that could be in the same household.
And why do you think it's important for people to understand these types of grief?
Well, in the beginning, I think I mentioned that it's good to be informed of what's going on in your life. Whether you have a diagnosis of something yourself personally, you're going to want to understand as much as you can about whatever that disorder is or diagnosis, because that's going to help you to understand it better and know what you can do to help yourself and know what the medical profession can do maybe to help you. So it's having an understanding and clarity in your life. So that's why it's important to understand the whole idea of grief and loss and the different components of it. So you don't feel like, oh my God, this is awful. Why am I feeling like this? Well, I understand that that's something that comes along with this type of grief, and you just have a better understanding of it.
What I really liked about your book was that it's designed to meet people wherever they are. It's not necessarily meant to be read front to back. Why was that flexibility important to you when you were writing it?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the topics I like to start out with too. So that's why the book has the title, An Animal Lover's Guide to Grief. I'm thinking about all the different topics I wanted to include in the book and what I wanted to cover. And I really wanted to talk about the relationship we have with our pet, the history of the human-animal bond. And I said, wow, but I got to wrap this up and make it understandable to people. Like, why is that in there for? Well, the reason it's in there, and I included, is because it's important to understand the bond that we have with our pets so that we can say, wow, I really understand now why this grief is really affecting me because I truly do have a deep bond with my pet. You can read about the history of that and how it evolved over history. You can understand how they help heal us in our lives. The dogs that are utilized for pet assisted therapy, they're healing for us. They provide so many benefits to our life. So now that we understand that, we can fully understand why we're grieving with this loss like we are. So I wanted to put that in there. So not to read it necessarily. If you just bought the book because you had a loss, I mentioned in that guide how to use this book, you might want to start with anticipatory grief. and understanding that and start planning for this loss that's going to happen. On the other hand, if you picked it up, because I would suggest every pet parent to actually buy this book or have somebody gift it to them, because they do have a pet that someday, unfortunately, will leave us. And so you could start reading that part about the human animal bond now. And if you have a clearer understanding of how they help heal us through animal assisted therapy and so on. So it's good to get now when you do adopt a pet or bring a pet into your life in whatever way you do. A lot of good information, I think, in there to help you better understand the grief. So that's why I decided to go with the guide to grief.
No, I really liked that you can jump back and forth to topics and have support where you need it. I thought that was really, really neat. It was not what I was expecting. I sat down thinking, I'm going to read this book. And then I was like, oh, wait, I don't have to do it like this. And so it was really neat to be able to kind of jump around and experience different parts of your book as I was ready to either reflect or move forward or think about my current situation with my current dogs. That was a really, really neat aspect of your book. I really liked that. Another thing that really stood out. Yeah, you're welcome. Another thing that really stood out was the reflective writing and the creative prompts. What kind of healing have you seen come from those journaling exercises in yourself or your clients?
If I could just step back on the guidebook idea for a moment, I'd appreciate that too.
Sure.
The other thing is, if you just lost your pet and you pick up this book, I would suggest you go right to the section on taking care of yourself. Because if you're just feeling completely overwhelmed by this whole situation, it's important to read about things to help you take care of yourself now before you get into some of the other areas of the book. What was your follow-up question, please?
The use of reflective writing and creative prompts and what kind of healing you've seen come from them.
A lot of people like to keep journals and they find it very, very helpful. And a lot of people don't want anything to do with it. And that's fine. But I would put it in the book, prompts that relate to the loss of your pet or your whole relationship with your pet. And because it can be very, very healing. It can make you, the idea is to reflect on those and at a quiet place in your home and a quiet place in your life. And there's things you can do to get yourself in the mood too before you start doing these exercises. You can do a little bit of visualization of your pet, closing your eyes, listening to some soft music, and just visualizing your relationship with your pet and what your pet meant to you. And then you can do one of the appropriate reflective experiences because they're after each chapter. So depending on what chapter maybe you just read or want to get into, you want to do that maybe first, or maybe you want to skip around and do a different one. That's perfectly okay. So just the act of writing and getting our thoughts in order can be very healing in general for a lot of people. And I also suggested that you maybe want to go out and get a special notebook, something you can decorate, something that has got a nice cover on it, not just your basic steno notebook or whatever, something that you can keep and reflect on all your writings at a later time, maybe after a year, maybe on the anniversary of the death of your pet. You might want to go back and reflect on some of those things that you wrote. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, I just ran across a few letters that I had. I was surprised I still kept them. Here's an example. I had some letters that my mom wrote to me. She's passed on many years ago. When I was in college, I said, wow, I kept these? And I was going through some things, and I started reading them. It just meant so much to me to read her words and what she said. So that reflection brought me some peace in knowing that all the love that she had for me and so on. Well, it's the same idea. You're reflecting on the loss of your pet and what your pet meant to you and the fun times you shared. And you'd be surprised. It brings a smile to your face. And so by doing that, it brings good endorphins into your body. Those are the feel-good hormones. And it just makes you feel like, oh, wow. Whenever I talk about my dogs, Jazzy and Wishbone, I just get all excited and I start smiling. It's like, wow, I feel good. I love to look at their pictures. I was flipping through a book I have of pictures of Wishbone, my first Jack Russell. And I was just like, wow, so many happy memories. And so I felt good. So that's why it's good to have those exercises that you do and then go back at a later date and reflect on them. So have a nice notebook, put it away and keep it. And I would suggest looking through it again at maybe the first anniversary, maybe after 6 months. That's what I would suggest for those. I think it can be very healing.
I love that idea. I've worked with a pet loss grief counselor myself personally. We've had her on the podcast before, and it's something that's been really, really incredible for me because I held on to a lot of guilt from some previous pets that I lost. It was really healing. And one of the prompts that's in your book is an exercise that she had me do, which is write a letter from your pet.
Yeah,
And
I like
it's
it.
just such a cool experience, right? Because it makes you think back to how your pet looks at you and how your pet thought about you. And you remember all of those things, like you were saying, all of the adventures that you had, all of the things that you did together, and how they looked at you and how they responded when you came home. So tell me how that idea came to you and how do people, because I know how I felt when my counselor asked me to do this, but how do people typically respond to that exercise?
Some people don't really want to get into that, and I respect that. But what I say to them then is, okay, that's fine. Maybe right now you don't want to do that, but keep an open mind that maybe you want to check that out a little later or go back to it and revisit it, because I think it can be very healing. And then some people are right on board with it. I've had actually some emails from people I don't even know that have specifically mentioned those exercises as being helpful to them and why it was helpful. That nice little extra thing to know that people are benefiting from that. I'm glad to hear that.
I love that people have written you letters and told you about that. That's so cool. What a neat response to your book to get letters from people and hear that
Yeah,
response. What a beautiful thing to share with people that you don't even know. Like, how cool is that? That's so cool.
it is. It's very, very rewarding. I just love that. It just kind of validates for me that, wow, my book has made a difference. And that's what I wanted. The whole purpose of writing this book was to help people. They see it on the shelf in the bookstore or they see it someplace else and they think, wow, I didn't know there was a book on that. This one looks interesting. And they flip through it and they buy it and they send me a comment or a review and it's like, oh, wow. I'm just so happy to know that I've made a difference in people's lives by helping them out through this loss, because it's just more and more common. I think more and more people have more than one dog in their household. And like I said, they're part of their life, their daily life for sure. So it's been a very rewarding experience.
I love that for you. I love it so much. I think it's just a really, really neat thing,
And,
especially in an area where we don't talk about it. And there is so much pressure, like you said, to move on after losing a pet. So, with
yeah.
that being said, how can people honor their grief while still creating a new kind of peace? Like your top tips.
Right after your pet dies, I would suggest, I just love this idea of lighting a candle. If you don't want to use a real candle, you could, battery operated. But to put that candle someplace where you're going to see it and a picture of your pet that you just lost, and just spend some time there as you're going through these different feelings of loss. Just sit there and close your eyes and just think about something in particular that really brought so much joy to your life. And then open your eyes and look at the picture of your dog and that candle burning there, and knowing that they'll always be a part of your life because they live on through the memories that we have with them. Choose something in the book or on your own, or a combination of what's in the book and what you think of, to honor your pet. On the anniversary in particular of their death would be a good time. Maybe their birthday, if you had a birthday celebration for them, you can do something special. You can make a donation, like if your dog died of a particular disease or disorder. I think that's a great way to honor them. Make a donation if you're able to an organization that is researching that, and there are places like that. Also, if your dog was maybe a senior dog, maybe you want to make a donation. Well, eventually they're all going to be senior dogs, but what I mean by that is if that's something you want to focus on, getting out the information about the importance of adopting senior dogs as well as just puppies. They can offer us so much in their later years as well. So any way that you can honor your pet by some of the ways that I mentioned in my book, I think are a good jumping off point, or your own ideas, I think would be helping your healing process for sure.
I think those are all great ideas. One of the things is really important to memorialize your pet in that way because you can carry that forward with you, even though they can't necessarily physically be there with you. You can carry their memory forward with you. I think that's why a
Mhm.
lot of people like to create Instagram pages for their dogs because it's a memory log of all of the
Mhm.
things that they did with their dog and all of the things that they went through. So it's really important to do those things and to have those memories and those places that you can go back and look upon and think, oh, yeah, this is something that, like you said, maybe it's a particular kind of rescue. Well, he made me think of this, or he made me do that, or maybe it's a specific kind of charity. Maybe your dog was really good with kids. And so you donate to some kind of educational area for kids. I just think that there's so many
Yeah.
things that you can do to help just spread that love that your dog would have spread. It's a beautiful thing that we can do.
It's endless. I mean, there's so many things, and there's Memorial Rock. We have a Memorial Rock in our garden with a little statue of a Jack Russell Terrier next to it, and we have Wishbone's name on it and a cute little saying that we used to always say. You see it every day you go out in the yard because it's there, and maybe put a flower there too, you know, a little planted flower. So yeah, there's just endless amount of ways you can do memorial ideas.
And it's so good for you too because you get that it's almost like it's relief, but it's also that all of the good that comes back with the going through the memories and all of that. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
really really important to honor that and to
absolutely.
find ways to bring it into your life. Let's pretend that you're talking to someone right now who
Okay.
just lost their pet like 2 minutes ago and they have no idea where to start, what would you want them to hear the most from you today?
You're not alone in your grief. I think that's really powerful. You are not alone in your grief. I'm here. I'm here to listen. Lots of times it's a matter of just being there. It's not like you're giving all of these words out to them. You're being quiet. You're opening up the door so they can step in because now they know that their grief is recognized and they're not alone because you're right there. Even if you're not there in person, if you're talking over the phone, those words just saying, you're not alone, I'm here for you. And then you let them talk and you truly listen. Sometimes it's just, like I said, it's not a lot of our words that we have to say. We have to listen. That's what's really important and knowing we're there for them. So that's what I would say. And I would say it's important right now for you to take care of yourself because this is a really difficult loss. And I would maybe ask them, okay, so it just happened. Were you able to make some plans ahead of time? Or was this sudden? I wouldn't delve a little bit into that, but I would keep it more listening to them first and not overwhelming them with too much information because they just have to kind of, wow, I just lost my dog. He or she is not here anymore. So they have to kind of like get that like belief that they really are gone. And then they have to acknowledge it. Yes, he's not coming back anymore. She's not coming back anymore. They've left this world. That's what I think. But you are not alone. And that's what I tried to really put in the book. You're not alone in this grief. Others care. And to reach out when it's so overwhelming that you don't know what to do. And you're not eating, you're not sleeping. It's becoming so overwhelming where you can't even do those things. So reach out for help. There are people that understand and care.
There absolutely are. What would your advice be if somebody was struggling and they were not sure if they should start with a book, start with a community group, or start with professional help?
I think it's going to be something that they might have to try one thing or another thing of those three choices that you mentioned and see what might work for them. If they are somebody that tends to gravitate toward reading a lot, get a lot of their information from reading, I would suggest maybe reading the book first. If there's somebody that more likes to be in front of somebody and talk to them, I would suggest they reach out to somebody and speak to them. So I think it just depends on what has worked for you in the past. If you're somebody, like I said, who's a reader, the book might be good. And then once you've digested some of the things in there, you can talk to somebody about some of those topics that are in the book. I know I do that with a lot of clients that are coming to me for pet grief and loss. I might suggest they read something that I send them to read or parts of the book and then say, now we'll talk about that further, or what part do you want to focus on in the book that you read that you have some questions about? kind of like what we're doing here. It would just depend on the person and how they have generally found help for issues in their life in the past. Is it talking a lot, reading, a couple of good ways.
Great. Before we wrap up today, tell everybody a little bit about the Rochester Center for Pet Loss and Grief. Tell everybody a little bit about where they can find you and a little bit about what you specialize and how they can contact you.
The Rochester Center for Pet Grief and Loss is something that I started, that it's all virtual now, what I do with that aspect of my practice. I wanted to highlight pet grief and loss as something that people can get help for if they wanted it. So I wanted to put that out there and promote that. And I kind of wanted to focus on that title as opposed to my other practice, which is counseling connections. So I wanted to take out that if anybody felt like, I don't need counseling for this. If they saw counseling connections, they might think that that's like a mental health. I don't have a mental health problem. Incidentally, grief is not pathological conditions, but it's important to talk about it with a trained counselor if that's what will be helpful for you. I just wanted to bring that awareness out there that there is such a thing as people who do work with people that have lost their pets, and it's not something that should be hidden, and just really put it out there to the public that they can see the name of this Rochester Center for Pet Grief and Loss. Wow, I'm really dealing with this loss and I need some help. Maybe I can contact the person that has this business. That's why I did it like that. I still have the counseling connections practice as well. I specialize in grief and loss. Over the years, I've done all types of counseling for all different types of conditions. But over the past maybe 15 years, I've specialized more in grief and loss. And then I got more specific into pet grief and loss as well. I felt there was a huge need for that. And I wanted to bring that service to the community.
Incredible. How long have you been working in this community?
This is actually my second career. I started out as a teacher many years ago, and then I went back for another master's degree, which was in mental health counseling. That was like 16 years ago. So I've been in the field for 16 years with the mental health counseling and have had additional training in grief and loss as a grief educator. There was additional training in specifically in pet loss counseling, trained professional in that as well. And then, of course, writing the book and constantly doing research and learning constantly about all the different things that are involved with grief and loss and pets in general. So it's just a huge field about the importance of having pets in our lives and training them in the pet-assisted therapy area. That's huge. I've done some volunteer work in that in the past, too. So it just kind of came 360 circle and focusing more and more just on pet grief and loss and the whole pet world, just trying to bring more awareness to the disenfranchised grief and helping even employers to know that this is a real grief that there could be some time off for work for, because I've also worked with individuals that weren't able to take time off of their work or only take maybe a couple hours off. They had their pet euthanized and they had to go back to work, and it was just really, really difficult. And the person feeling like they can't share this with their fellow workers because they're going to feel ashamed, and they feel like, oh, wow, why are you feeling so bad? You can get another dog, like I said earlier. It isn't the same dog. So the person, after a while, finally breaks down at work and sobs, and fellow employees say, what's going on? Why are you so sad for? What's going on? Oh, nothing. I'll be okay. I just got the sniffles. And they don't share it, or maybe they finally do, and they get somebody that comes back with either a very understanding response to it or the opposite. And so you never know what you're going to get. So I'm just trying to bring more awareness to the community. I've done some speaking on this topic, the importance of recognizing this grief and allowing some time for your employees to have time off and being open to that possibility, because it's a loss, whether it's a human or a pet in your life. It's still a loss. So if we're going to give time off for a human loss, we need to give time off for a pet loss, because that's a valid loss. So that's why I want the community to know that this is a valid loss and needs to be acknowledged and validated, just like any other loss. To share something very positive too, I know one person in particular told me when they lost their pet, wow, it was like amazing. It was like, that's the way it should be, just like a human loss. What do people do for a human loss? They generally bring over food. They might send flowers. They might send cards. Okay, well, it's no different with a pet loss. And so this person experienced that. The neighbors were bringing over food. They were bringing over flowers, whatever. And they got it. And it was like, wow, this is great. It's like this validation that people get it. It's just like heartwarming to me. So heartwarming. It's like, yes, yes. I'm going to keep trying to get that word out there and do my part to have this loss truly validated and honored.
Well, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. I love normalizing hard topics, and you are out there fighting a really big battle with this one. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today and tell everybody about your book. What would you like to leave our listeners with today?
My book is filled with a lot of compassion and understanding for this topic. And I hope that you can purchase it or purchase it for somebody else you know that's going to deal with this loss, because every pet owner, every pet will have to deal with this loss. They come into our lives and we're so happy and thrilled, and that's a happy time. But then when they leave us, which they do, they will leave us. And that's the saddest part of the journey with our pet. So my book or any other book that you choose can be helpful to read. I wrote this with a lot of love and the intention to try to help others that are not afraid. Now they feel like, oh, I don't think I can go and talk to somebody just right now. Maybe I will someday, but right now I just need some other kind of help. Well, I think you might find some of that help in this book, and I hope you do, because you're not alone in your grief.
You are not alone, and you can absolutely feel the love in this book. So you guys heard her. Spread joy, be kind, and buy the book. If you've been feeling like no one really understands what you're going through with your dog, it can feel really isolating and heavy, carrying all that weight by yourself day after day. That's why I created a free community, a safe space where you can share the hard stuff, get support, and be surrounded by people who truly get it. You'll find the link in the show notes below. Thank you for listening to Straight Up Dog Talk. Remember, new episodes drop every Monday and Wednesday. I'll see you next time.